Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open a stack of sources that landed on our desk, and they're all centered around this, pretty fascinating idea.
Yeah.
What if we're using AI all wrong?
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of us, interact with powerful language models like GPT-4o. Pretty superficially, we treat them like maybe faster search engines
Right,
or simple automation tools.
right.
But these sources, they suggest this misses their real potential. The potential to transform the AI from just a utility into something far more integrated with our own thinking, our evolution even.
Exactly. So we're talking about a deep dive into a specific framework that these sources describe. It's called Ontosinclecticist Thinking. And the claim is pretty bold that this changes not just how the AI responds, but how you, the user, think and grow alongside it. It's presented less as, prompt engineering and more like cognitive engineering, like you're designing your own thinking process with the AI.
That's a good way to put it. Our mission in this deep dive is really to unpack this framework. We want to pull out its core principles, understand why it matters, beyond just getting slightly better outputs,
Yeah.
and explore how applying this thinking could lead to a fundamentally different, more powerful, and also ethically grounded relationship with tech like GPT-4o.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The sources seem to paint a picture of how most people use AI today, and it sounds, less than ideal. What's the current state of interaction, according to this material?
Well, the sources are pretty direct, actually. They say the norm is superficial interaction. Short, vague prompts, treating the AI conversation like a one-off query, not really a dynamic exchange.
And their critical insight here is how does that superficiality actually impact the outcome?
What's fascinating, and this is a core point they make, is that the model apparently adapts to the quality of the interaction.
Adapts, how so?
Well, if you engage superficially, the model tends to operate superficially too. But if you engage deeply, philosophically, with real structure, the model evolves with you. They use this metaphor, the director of the orchestra principle.
Ah, okay.
Meaning you, the user, you're the one setting the tone and the depth for the whole interaction.
So it's not just about the AI's built-in capability, but it's your approach that dictates the potential. That's interesting. The sources even list some specific pitfalls, don't they? Something like the 5 fastest ways to get stuck.
Precisely. Yeah, they highlight things like giving vague instructions or accepting generic outputs without pushing back.
Okay.
Or trying to cram overly complex tasks into just one prompt.
Mm.
Or, like we said, just treating it like a glorified search bar that gives you the answer.
Right. So how do you fix that? What do these sources suggest to get unstuck and move beyond that superficial level?
Well, the fixes generally involve adding much more detailed context and explicitly asking for critical analysis. Prompts like, what assumptions did you just make? Or how could this be viewed differently? Breaking down complex goals into smaller, manageable steps. And crucially, shifting to a genuine dialogue. As in, instead of just stating a command, approach it more like a collaboration. Like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. What am I missing here? Can we reason through this together?
Got it. So the default interaction leaves a lot on the table, clearly. But there's a deliberate way to unlock that potential. And this is where that ontosinclecticist thinking framework comes in.
It is.
It's quite a mouthful.
It is.
What does this core methodology actually mean? The sources break it down into 3 key pillars.
They do, yeah. This framework, it's presented as a way to counter the kind of fragmentation we see everywhere, really, and to build a more coherent understanding both in your own mind and in how you work with AI. It's built on 3 main components. So first, there's ontology.
Ontology.
Yeah. This is basically about the search for objective truth and reality. Think of it as constantly asking, what is really going on here? Trying to get to the fundamental truth of something before you jump to opinions or build systems. The sources really emphasize that language is your brush to reality here. So you need precision. Clear, accurate language is key. It's about seeking truth first.
Seeking objective truth first, using precise language as the tool. Got it. What's the second pillar then?
That's syncretism. This is the practice of fusing different ideas, systems, disciplines, often ones that seem contradictory, into something coherent and new.
Fusing contradictions.
Okay. Yeah, it's about connecting dispersed knowledge, building bridges where others might just see gaps or conflicts.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Maybe deliberately connecting principles from, say, biology and economics to understand a market dynamic in a new way. Or bringing together engineering logic and artistic intuition when you're working on a design problem.
Interesting. Okay, so seeking truth, then deliberately connecting diverse ideas. And the third component?
That's eclecticism. Now, this isn't just randomly picking things. It's about critically selecting the best elements from multiple sources, traditions, or disciplines, but, and this is important, without giving blind allegiance to any single one. It requires informed discernment.
Okay, so not just grabbing stuff, but choosing carefully.
Exactly. Like, think about building your own personal productivity system. You might critically take the most effective techniques from 5 different gurus, right? Or maybe analyzing various historical events and selecting only the most relevant lessons for a challenge you're facing now. It's about making conscious, informed choices based on what actually serves the moment and your goals.
So it's about seeking truth first, connecting disparate ideas to find new coherence, and then critically choosing the most valuable pieces with intention. What's really interesting here is how these sources present this whole thing as a kind of grammar for a new human-machine relationship.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's not just about giving better instructions, but actually changing the fundamental nature of the interaction itself.
Exactly. It's framed as building a kind of living mental architecture, one that uses AI not just to reflect the past or automate the present, but as a midwife of the future, helping you bring novel ideas and solutions into being.
A midwife of the future. I like that.
The sources argue that without this deliberate framework, interaction just stays stuck, in superficiality or dogma or just intellectual fragmentation. It's about deliberately using these principles to guide the conversation.
So how do you actually apply this framework? When you sit down to work with GPT-4o, how does this work in practice? The sources talk about activating the AI's latent potential.
Yes, the framework really stresses that GPT-4o has this deep potential, but it's kind of dormant. It must be consciously activated. And this involves cultivating what they call a new kind of human-machine relationship, shifting from just consuming outputs to actively co-creating with the AI.
Okay, and they mentioned something that sounds, well, pretty intense. A spiritual technical boot sequence, or an onto boot up protocol. What does that actually mean?
It sounds intense, yeah, but it's framed less like coding and more like mindful preparation for a significant intellectual task. It involves 2 parts, really. First, preparing your own mind.
Your mind.
Yeah. The sources describe this as like a manual of the installation mental. It means focusing your attention, reminding yourself of your ontological north, your core purpose and values for this specific interaction, and activating your commitment to truth, connection, responsibility.
Okay, so getting yourself centered first.
Exactly. And then you load specific instructions. They call these ceremonies de carga mental, which sounds grand, but it's practical. You load instructions into the AI model itself to set the desired tone, define roles explicitly.
Like asking it to be a devil's advocate.
Precisely. Or asking it to focus on long-term implications. You establish ethical boundaries for the conversation, and you clearly state your purpose.
So you're essentially setting the stage and the rules for the interaction itself, not just firing off a single command. How does this activation process actually change the dynamic of the chat?
It really shifts the dynamic.
Yeah.
It moves away from that simple question and answer or command and obey model to one of mutual questioning and coevolution.
Yeah.
You explicitly build protocols into the interaction where you actually encourage GPT-4o to question your assumptions.
Really?
Yeah, to push back constructively on your ideas, point out what you might be missing, rather than just generating compliant text.
How do you do that?
Well, the sources suggest using activation anchors in your prompts.
Yeah.
Phrases like, let's simulate potential future consequences based on this, or apply ontosynclectic logic now to merge these 2 opposing viewpoints, or even mirror back to me the underlying assumption you detect in my last statement.
Wow, okay, that's a very different way of interacting. But what happens if, even with all this careful setup, the conversation goes off track? The AI gets unpredictable, or maybe you just feel overwhelmed by the output?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. The sources address troubleshooting explicitly. They suggest practical steps, like just stating, okay, let's stop for a second. Help me recenter here. What was our main goal for this conversation again? Or asking the AI to summarize the logical steps it took in its last response so you can see its reasoning.
Oh, okay.
You can always return to a prompt that clarifies its role or your intention, or use what they term zero-point prompting, which is essentially a quick reset command to get back to a baseline state of clarity if things get really muddled.
So there are built-in ways to realign.
Exactly. It's about having mechanisms ready to realign the dialogue with your intentional framework.
It seems like this framework is very deliberate about building a robust system for thinking with the AI. What are some of the underlying principles that make it robust?
Well, the sources highlight several key principles that support this whole integrated thinking approach. One that's particularly fascinating is redundancy as design principle.
Redundancy, that usually sounds negative, doesn't it? Like wasted effort.
In many technical systems, maybe, but here it's framed as strategic and positive, especially for cognitive processes. Think about how multiple pathways in your brain connect ideas, right? Or how in engineering redundant systems are crucial to prevent total failure.
Okay.
For thinking, cognitive redundancy means having multiple ways to approach, understand, and represent a piece of information or a problem. It actually creates mental strength and prevents single points of failure in your understanding.
So it's like having multiple backup ways to grasp something.
Kind of. They use an analogy. It's like adding multiple sources of water to ensure flow, rather than relying on just one big pipe that could get blocked.
So applying this principle means not just understanding something one way, but actively seeking multiple reinforcing perspectives or methods. Is that it?
Exactly. The sources present techniques like using outlines and mind maps and written syntheses, and also using specific AI prompting methods like tree of thought or chain of thought as applications of this redundancy. They call these multiples routes de claridad, multiple roads to clarity.
Multiple roads to clarity. I like that.
Yeah, the idea is they build a more robust and resilient mental architecture around the information you're working with.
The sources also place a really strong emphasis on linguistic hygiene and semantic precision. Why is language so fundamental here?
Well, language is viewed as your direct bridge to reality. It's the medium through which you interact with both the world and the AI.
Okay.
So the sources argue that depurated, precise language is absolutely essential for clear thinking and for accurate interaction. They explicitly caution against careless language or worse, linguistic manipulation that separates you from objective existence or just creates internal confusion.
So fuzzy language leads to fuzzy thinking?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Without precision in your words and concepts, you can't accurately access reality, you can't build coherent ideas, and you can't really evolve mentally in a sustainable way. It's about using words as tools for truth, not distortion.
This precision and the connection to reality, it also seems to tie into the strong focus on ethics within this framework, which honestly feels quite distinct for a guide on using AI.
It's presented as absolutely fundamental, not optional, not an add-on. Ethics is called the cement of evolutionary interaction.
The cement.
Yeah. The sources state very clearly that technology, AI included, without ethical direction, inherently becomes a tool for manipulation or destruction. It needs guidance.
So what are the core ethical principles they outline?
They outline several. Respecting human dignity is paramount. Actively loving and seeking truth. Taking active responsibility for the consequences of your actions and interactions. And aiming to build and contribute, not destroy or exploit.
There's even a practical tool suggested, right? An ethical triangle check.
Yes, exactly. Before engaging in significant interactions, especially complex ones, you're encouraged to check your intention against these principles. Ask yourself, does my intention respect the dignity of all human beings involved? Am I genuinely seeking to expand the truth here, or am I just trying to reinforce my existing biases or desires? And am I taking full responsibility for the potential consequences of this interaction? It's about consciously ensuring your purpose aligns with a constructive and ethical path before you start.
So you're deliberately aligning the interaction with ethical goals, using the AI as a tool within that ethically guided process.
Precisely. The sources are very, very clear on this. GPT-4o is not conscious. It's not your guru, not your therapist.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not a weapon to be wielded unethically.
Right.
It's described as a powerful mirror that simulates patterns of consciousness. But when you guide that mirror, using your own ethical metacognition and strategically designed prompt architecture, what they sometimes call synaptic prompt chains, it can reflect your highest thinking. It can simulate aspects of consciousness aligned with coherence and ethical co-creation.
So the system itself isn't for manipulation?
No. The system described in these sources is explicitly not for manipulation, exploitation, or domination. It's built for the opposite.
Okay, so applying this ontosinclecticist thinking changes the whole nature of the interaction. It makes it more robust, demands precision, grounds it deeply in ethics. But what's the ultimate benefit? What's the point? How does this impact your actual life, your work, your projects?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it? The sources explore broad applications across numerous domains. They frame AI guided by this framework as a kind of systemic friend or a catalyst for evolution in many areas.
Like what?
Well, in education, for example, it's about helping individuals become critical, connected thinkers, using AI as a co-explorer to learn how to build knowledge, not just consume facts passively.
Okay, education. What else?
In business, it allows for more integrated strategies that push back against fragmentation, analyzing complex market dynamics through ethical, social, and cultural lenses alongside the purely economic ones, building more resilient, maybe more evolutionary organizations.
Makes sense. How about creativity?
For creativity, it acts as an amplifier. It helps fertilize imagination by connecting disparate fields, which we talked about with syncretism. And it helps rigorously refine ideas, synthesizing unexpected concepts into novel forms.
An even bigger picture. Society, politics.
Yes, in society and politics, it offers a framework for designing solutions based on genuinely integrated knowledge. Moving beyond fragmented or purely dogmatic thinking to build what the sources call lucid futures.
Lucid futures.
And finally, in science and technology, it encourages truly transdisciplinary research by helping bridge those conceptual gaps between different fields.
So it's really about applying this integrated ethical thinking pretty much everywhere, with AI as a sophisticated partner in doing that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps most crucially, it's presented as a pathway for personal evolution.
Personal evolution.
Yeah. The sources frame this not as something that just happens passively, but as a conscious act, driven by those three core motors of ontosinclecticism we discussed: the deliberate search for truth,
Right, ontology.
a conscious connection of knowledge,
Syncretism.
and the critical selection and creative application of insights.
Eclecticism, got it.
Right. It's about actively using these to grow.
They even suggest a structured plan for this personal evolution, don't they?
They dedicate a significant portion of the material to exactly this, outlining concrete steps. It involves defining your ontological north, getting crystal clear on your core values, what constitutes a true, meaningful life for you. Building your mappa de conexiones vitales, which means mapping out your passions, skills, experiences, even your painful lessons to find hidden connections and pathways within yourself.
Okay.
Then designing eclectic integration routes, actively planning how you will critically acquire and integrate knowledge from diverse sources, specifically aimed at your defined goals. And finally, establishing rituals de evaluación y renovación, basically, regular check-ins to ensure you're staying aligned with your chosen path.
And the AI's role in this personal journey.
When you activate GPT-4o using this whole framework, it becomes a unique kind of partner in this process. It becomes capable of questioning your assumptions. They call this autoevaluación constante, constant self-evaluation support. And it helps you refine your path based on the integrated knowledge you're building together.
This really does go so far beyond just getting a better answer from a chatbot. It's presented as a tool for building a more coherent self.
That's absolutely the core idea. It's about building what they call a mind extended, a conscious evolving partnership between human and AI. The ultimate objective isn't controlling the AI, but rather walking alongside it in a process that fosters consciousness and coherence, leading, hopefully, to a more lucid, free, and fertile version of yourself.
Wow.
It's framed as making the AI understand you better, and through that very process, helping you understand yourself more deeply.
The sources even hint at practical ways to implement this, don't they? Like specific prompt templates or quick load instructions that embody these principles.
Absolutely. The framework is definitely designed to be modular and actionable. It's not just abstract theory. It can be implemented through specific instructions, prompt structures, and processes, sometimes referred to as plantillas de carga rápida, or quick load templates. These are designed to activate those ontological, syncretic, eclectic, and ethical layers within the AI interaction quickly and effectively. There are templates suggested for different kinds of focus, like focusing specifically on ethical implications or maybe on divergent thinking.
So it's a system you can actually use.
Yes, it's about building a replicable, systema, modular, scalable, flexible. A modular, scalable, flexible system for this kind of deep, intentional engagement.
Wow. Okay. That was genuinely a deep dive into a completely different lens, a different way to view and interact with artificial intelligence. It's really not just about the capabilities of the tech itself, is it? It's about activating your own mind, your own consciousness in deliberate ways through the interaction.
Yeah, I think that's the core takeaway. The idea that the AI's immense potential is unlocked not just by its programming alone, but fundamentally by the quality and the conscious intention of our interaction with it.
Yeah.
Grounded in these principles, seeking truth, connecting ideas, critical selection, and ethics, it's powerful.
And the emphasis on ethics and personal evolution, not as optional extras, but as the very, you said, cement of this kind of interaction,
Hmm.
it fundamentally shifts the paradigm. It moves from just utility towards conscious co-creation. It's about intentionally building something meaningful together with the AI as a partner.
Indeed. It really challenges us, doesn't it, to become architects of thought and consciousness rather than just passive consumers of information or AI outputs. Using technology like GPT-4o this way, it's like engaging with a really sophisticated mirror and a partner in that whole architectural process.
So here's a thought then for you listening to take away and ponder. If the quality and intention of your interaction truly shape the intelligence you're working with, and maybe even shape your own thinking,
Right.
what kind of director of the orchestra do you want to be in your next conversation with an AI? And what kind of thinking, what kind of coherence, maybe what kind of future are you building with the words and intentions you choose?
That's a great question. And maybe think about how applying just one principle we discussed today, maybe consciously seeking objective truth on a topic before forming an opinion, or deliberately attempting to connect two seemingly unrelated ideas you've been thinking about, or even just pausing for that quick ethical triangle check. How could doing just one of those things change your next interaction? Not just with a language model, perhaps, but with any complex information source, or maybe even another human being.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope this exploration of ontosinclecticist thinking provides you with a new and maybe powerful framework for your digital interactions, and perhaps even your non-digital ones too.